Firstly, let's get started with low back stretches. Now, we're essentially going to be asking the question, should I use low back flexion stretches? So if you see someone lying on the floor and then tucking their knees to their chest, is that an effective stretch? It depends on a few things. First of all, we have to ask, is there pain? If there's pain, then the answer is different than if there's not pain. So we'll look at if there is pain first. So if there's pain, there is a pattern to it. Now the pattern could be pain occurs with flexion. Another pattern could be pain occurs when you're static, so sat down, which could include flexion, doesn't have to. But if you sit slouched, so there's a degree of flexion happening and the fact that you're static. Could be extension, so there's different patterns to it, is what I'm trying to say. Now, it depends on the pattern whether you should stretch it. If there's pain there, as a general rule, I would just say to people, don't stretch the lower back, even if it feels tight. And I'm going to explain that in a second. I would focus more around stretching the hips and thinking about if there is any sciatic symptoms. So there's pain going down the leg. And I would probably, certainly for the first part, I would not worry too much about stretching the hams. I mean, in all honesty, I probably wouldn't stretch the hamstrings anyway. But I would avoid irritating the or potentially irritating the sciatic nerve with hamstring stretches and things like that. So with regards to should you stretch your lower back when there's pain, as a general rule, and very much as a general rule, I don't know anyone's particular back pain. I'm not speaking about anyone's particular back pain. I would just say, as a general rule, I would say no to stretching it. If there isn't pain, then that's different. So if there's no pain there, but all you're experiencing is low back tightness and it just feels uncomfortable and it's just not a useful thing to be experiencing, then there is license to stretch your lower back. Now, what we have to understand about stretching and stretching the lower back is the neuromuscular system. And there's one basic principle that makes up, it's one of the receptors, called a muscle spindle. Now, just to quickly explain what a muscle spindle is, if you can imagine a muscle, it's not one big muscle. There are compartments to it. So if we break down the entire muscle into its individual components or compartments, it would break down all the way to muscle fibers. And if you want to visualize a muscle fiber, just think of a straw. A long straw. And if you can think, you've got that little perforated bit which allows the straw to bend. Imagine that all the way down, because it'll allow it to get longer and it'll allow it to get shorter. It doesn't necessarily bend, but the muscle fiber gets longer and shorter. So we've got that muscle fiber. It's a very small component, and there are hundreds of thousands upon millions of them within a muscle. And as I mentioned, they get shorter and they get longer. Now, what you have around these straws, it's literally like a spring. So it's sort of coiled and wrapped around the muscle fiber. So if you take a spring and you look down its end, you can see right through it. That's kind of what the muscle spindle's like. It wraps around the muscle fiber, and as it gets longer, it detects that it's getting longer, and as it gets shorter, it detects that it's getting shorter. Now, with regards to stretching, it's that component that restricts your stretching. So if the body perceives that the muscle is getting longer than it likes, it will essentially start to hold it in position. So it won't allow it to go any further. In some respects, it's contracting to stop you from going any further, if that makes sense. So you go into a stretch, then you really feel the tightness. That's the muscle spindle saying no more, no further. So it's not necessarily that the muscle is tight, it's more that the neuromuscular system isn't allowing it to go any further. So that's kind of like the first bit that we need to understand. When we can understand that, we understand there's something more going on than just my muscle is tight. So we've got that stretch receptor that's essentially holding our muscle at a certain length. So if you've got low back tightness, there is a very good chance that it's those muscle spindles holding your muscle in place. And it could be doing it for the purposes of guarding against something. So it may be that there has been instability at the spine. It may be that there has been an injury to the spine. And what your body then does, it realizes that and it tightens up around it to maintain stability and to protect against any further injury. So that's essentially what your body has done if that is the case. Now, when that injury goes, the muscle tightness doesn't necessarily go as well. The body can still perceive and think there's a problem here, so it just holds it. So when we talk about stretching the lower back to get out of that, when you lie on your back and bring your knees to your chest and you lengthen that, what you're basically doing is you're lengthening the muscle, and you can override and allow the stretch receptors to open out. And that's what gives you the relief. But what then happens after about 15-20 minutes, the stretch receptors go, yeah, I don't like this, so I'm going to tighten you back up. And then you get your muscle tightness again. So it's not necessarily that the low back is tight, is that it's more that the body is holding it in that position. Now, a very simple way of overriding that is using that 15 to 20 minute window. So as an example, let's just say there is instability in the spine and the body is guarding against that instability. So it's holding your muscles tight because it doesn't want to be unstable. So it's using the tightness to create the stability that isn't there. And what then you're able to do, so you stretch it out, you've then got a 15 to 20 minute window to get some conscious muscle activation in there, to help the body realise that it doesn't need to hold it tight. So you're basically communicating with your body using exercise to be able to say, don't worry about my low back, I've got this under control. Because you're not saying that at the moment and your body's going, I need to tighten this up, and therefore it tightens. So we need to use that and then activate the muscles within that window. So we need to use exercises that activate longissimus, iliocostalis, quadratus lumborum, glute medius, glute minimus, latissimus dorsi. So all these different muscles need to be activated, rectus abdominis, internal and external obliques as well, so the abdominal wall. So we need to start using exercises to build that stability. So we open it out with the stretching, and then we've got the 15 to 20 minute window to build in some additional stability. If we can do that, what we are then able to do is override that neuromuscular system, that response by the neuromuscular system to hold everything tight, to guard against a problem that may not even occur, if that makes sense. So it's a relatively straightforward to explain It's not always so straightforward and simple to actually put into practice, but the main sort of parts are there. If it's just low back tightness that one has and there is no pain there, stretch the lower back out, but then put the activation in consciously using exercise. If there is pain there, you have to understand the pain pattern, which we're not going to go into at the moment, but we have to understand that pain pattern to get the pain pattern out, and then we can rebuild the lower back using exercise and things like that. So that kind of goes some way to answering, should you be doing low back flexion stretches, or should you be doing low back stretches as a whole? If there's no pain, it's just the muscle getting tight, you can do it, but you've got to do it in the right way with conscious exercise muscle activation.